again
Talking
and again
Thoth,
and again.
60,000 listeners.
I think we have 80,000 now, don't we?
Yeah, no, it went down a little bit.
Oh shit. What are we doing wrong? I think we're missing Hermes, the Hermetic spirit, the spirit of
Yeah,
Hermes. So this
let's
is what I'm
invoke that.
trying to do is I'm trying to bring back the god Hermes to the cultural discourse. You know, we know that the logos is very present. We know that there's a lot of extraordinary philosophers out there, like John Vervaeke and Alexander Bard, and all kinds of incredible, people who are working strongly with the logos, which they're working with philosophy, and they're very Apollonian, and they're very combative, and they're very, phallic, and that's all great. But I want to bring back Hermes the psychopomp.
Let's do an invocation.
Yes. And what are we invoking when we invoke Hermes? I mean, you're familiar with Hermetic traditions. You know a bit about magic. So that is the question, right? Are we invoking a god? Are we invoking a spirit? Are we engaging in some kind of neo-paganism, new age bullshit? What are we doing when we invoke the god Hermes?
No, I think Hermes, there's so many interesting things about Hermes, the Mercury, Thoth, all the different associations you have to this god of attention and intellect and fierce intuition, I would say.
Fierce intuition. That's a good way of putting it. Yeah. And he's a trickster, right? He's
Right,
the trickster. And he takes
right.
people into the afterworld, but that just means he takes people into the bardo. And we don't have to talk about after death or anything. He takes people into a world that's, very strange and slippery and full of powerful images and symbols. And
Are you talking about Hermes or Anubis?
no, Hermes. He takes people beyond the rational.
Okay.
Even though he is also the god of philosophy, it's very interesting, right? But I'm thinking of him as as a slippery fellow, as a dangerous fellow, as something, somebody a bit um, provocative to the status quo.
Right.
In
No,
any
it's like,
case,
yeah.
oh, sorry, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, it's like the symbol we talked about this is always more complex than the interpretation. And so when I think of Hermes, I think of three things. I think
Okay.
of the thing. Okay, it's depicted and lots of times with a sphere with wings, and so that's of course it's like our attention span. It goes from here to there. It's like all over the place. That's for me at least one interpretation. It's like attention itself and the fleeting aspect of attention, right? And then you
Mm-hmm.
have a second interpretation is that you have it as a the voice or the bringer of the voice of God, so you have like the messenger in a kind of way
Yes, he's the
uh,
messenger. Yes.
of God, whatever God is, but the higher intuition, the true intuition, let's say. And that what you say, I never heard that one actually, but that would be the third, I guess, like the guide to the underworld. You say, no?
Yeah, that's the psychopomp. Uh-huh.
Can you elaborate on that?
Well, I'm not thinking of it I'm not being a literalist, when I talk about Hermes. I'm talking about the spirit of Hermes. And when Hermes guides people to the afterworld, I think that he's guiding people through strange and unusual and intense, states of being and states of mind, like the bardos in Tibetan Buddhism. The bardos are these realms of where of intensity. If that makes any sense.
Okay.
But anyway, in my course, which I'm calling back to Hermes, uh, and I came to the title of this course very recently. I was going to call it Practical Magic, So Hermes is the magician, let's say. He's the divine magician. And the course is I want to explore magic, because I think this needs to. So John's course is called Back to Socrates, and the Socratic tradition is all about logic, and is all about dialectics, and it's all about ethics and truth, and these kind of Socrates is a, let's say, a Johnny yoga. He's working with mind. It's all Johnny, right? Or he's logos, and this is very important. I think John's right. We need to get back to this. We need to get back to philosophy in its Socratic sense, and that's very good. But then the counter side of this is this hidden, arcane, secret, magic, mystical side of our experience, which is more the Hermetic realm.
Right.
So I thought that, yes, that was like a aha moment. It's like, okay, Hermes. Okay, we have Socrates over here, doing the logos, doing the dialectic, doing the rational, and then John's trying to expand the meaning of that and bring in the religious, and then the Hermetic traditions, the secret, the hidden, the unspeakable, the more visual aspect, because Thoth, or whatever, the Egyptian god of magic, is sort of related to Hermes, and he is, he from the Egyptian tradition was much more visual, right? And the Greek traditions are much more logocentric. So this would be the more, I don't know what I wouldn't, you could call it mythos if you like, but the visual culture, the psychedelic, in a way. Right. Not necessarily related to drugs, but the trans-rational.
Yeah.
And since I've been practicing in a very symbolic tradition, like Vajrayana is extremely Baroque, Vajrayana Buddhism, and it works with symbols all the time, and it works with all kinds of strange, apparently strange practices, which, in the tantric tradition, there are 83,000 different practices, whereas, it's very different than Zen, So I kind of think of Socrates as sort of like in Zen, right? Socrates is about truth and meaning, and the Vajrayana and the Hermetic traditions are more about magic and symbolism and experiment, and they have this artistic quality to them.
Right. It's an arcane symbol, because again, then there's also like the idea that Mercury and Hermes and Thoth, or however I never know how you pronounce Thoth, like how do you pronounce that in it?
Because it makes a in your mouth. It's like hard to say, right? Yeah, I just say Thoth, but could be Thoth or Thoth.
Because the idea also is that they represent like pure intellect. That's also an aspect of, like where Jupiter, let's say, represents the archetypal father figure in a sort of sense, or Bina, like a deep feminine nature. The Hermes Mercury is also, the idea of intellect per se. And
but what do we mean by intellect is the question, right? Is it just propositional thoughts, like you would do in a philosophy course? I don't think that's what the Hermetic intellect is. I think it's more like prajna in Buddhism, which is sort of direct insight into reality, which is not exactly intellect in the way we think of intellect today. Well,
what I think you can look at like this, or you can, what I also do is, if I look at the tree of knowledge from the Kabbalah, right? Mm-hmm. And so you have Hermes Mercury appearing in different areas on that tree, and so you have, like, for example, a Chokmah is ruled by Mercury and Nuit, the Egyptian goddess, right? Mm-hmm. But then you have like the paths between Ketha and Chokma, which is the Magus, which is also ruled by Mercury. And so the idea behind it is, okay, you have the unstructured, chaotic kind of space, right? And it's not structured yet because our intellect hasn't condensed or crystallized any information. It's just chaos in some sense, right? And so what the intellect or Hermes Mercury does as this pure intellectual form or capacity, let's say, is to take the chaos and create, basic memes, basic narratives, basic ideas that then pass the abyss and are understandable as, concrete forms or ideas. So you have this chaos which is approached by spirit, and let's say, and made understandable, and Mercury is the agency of that, and that's how I understand.
So you think you're equating Mercury with the logos, and I'm equating or Hermes with the logos, whereas I'm actually thinking the other way around. I'm thinking that Hermes is the realm of reflection, the lunar realm. So it does reflect. It is a reflecting quality, but it's a lunar realm. So it's a strange and bizarre and mercurial realm. It's not the solar realm of the logos. That makes sense.
Why would you say
so Shokma? I would say Shokma or whatever. The male is just this is energy that's just going like this, and then Bina sort of reflects and bends and moves that energy into birth, right? It's the feminine. So that's what. So I say that's why I'm sort of that's how I kind of see it. But in my course, I'm not going to talk too much about like the astrological. Like in the occult systems, I'm not going to talk about too much of the correspondences because I want to examine each symbol system separately. Like I want to look at, for example, the tarot from the Marseille point of view with using Jodorowsky, just that, and then I don't want to mix them all together. I don't want to mix together Sifrot and tarot astrological correspondences. I don't want to do that. I want to stick with the symbols in themselves, and then so I'm not using the Crowley. I'm not using the Golden Dawn. I'm not using the Crowley stuff because that's extremely complex, and I'm trying to talk about, let's say, the Hermetic as a whole, right? As meaning the spirit of Hermetic means this, like the hermit is the meditator. He's the one who is he's the one who works with reflections. He's the one who works with he's this in between character who can go between the divine and the ordinary and pass in between worlds. He's not Socrates. He's not this logical propositional. He's not always working with dialectics, and he expresses himself in more unusual, slippery, symbolic kind of ways. So he is the father of philosophy, but it's not this Greek philosophy in the sense that Socrates, Plato, Aristotle, and all that are. He's not. I would say that they're more Apollonian in their approach.
I think we're not talking about different things. I think we are like, it's like when you say lunar reflection, you're actually talking about the moon being ruled by Mercury, and so I'm talking about Chokma, which is a different kind of attractor, also being kind of ruled or influenced, and that I think exactly this is depicted in the image of the sphere with the wings, because you can have both. You can have like the lunar kind of reflection aspect of Mercury, but you can also have like this Mercury aspect of approaching chaos and crystallizing, condensing new information.
Makes sense to me. Yeah, sure.
And so that, you know, that's my input here. That's
absolutely. Like the mercury drips down, right? And the sulfur rises up in the alchemical tradition. So the sulfur is all this, you know, rises up from the malkuth, if you like, but it's this fiery energy, this furnace, and the mercury drips down, and they meet and they form. You know, they create they form in the center. They form you know, appearance, right?
Yeah.
They form the, you know, the world of illusion, you know, and also in the world of illusion, which also has a doorway into the real. So it's kind of, I think it's like this border between the illusion and the real.
And I think you're completely right. It's not, you know, intellectual, Socrates, Apollonian kind of thinking. It's not. There's way more. I am hesitating to Dionysian, but it's like way more chaotic, fluctuating, impulse-driven, intuition-like, cognitive movement there. You know, it's just like which escapes, you know, the formal operational kind of thinking.
Yes, yeah, and you know, and I'm not putting that as a contradictory, because John says many of those things as well. But what I find really missing in like the spiritual culture of let's say America or you know, the Anglo spiritual culture, there's this kind of Protestantism over you know, that is over everything, which is it's very rationally oriented. It's very logocentric. It's all about you know, it's all about propositional truth, and it's all very clean and sort of safe, and at the same time, I believe it kind of represses this other aspect of spirituality, which is the mythopoetic, the symbolic, you know, the more the wild and the more dangerous aspects of spirituality, which are usually contained in the hidden traditions.
Yeah.
So actually, this Wednesday we're having Amanda come on. She's a Gnostic, you know, bishop from a lineage in France, and she talks about, you know, having experiences of you know, meeting the spirit of Mary in various sacred places in France, and that's kind of stuff that you can't really talk about in the mainstream culture, and you can't really go there because it's considered to be you know, a cult in a negative sense, and a cult in the negative sense is sort of, you know, the place where you do child sacrifices and things like that. But a cult just means occluded, hidden, and it's occluded and hidden because it's not always for popular consumption. So what we would do in the course would be to just lay out some of these other worlds which are present but not discussed in the mainstream. Like everybody knows what Greek philosophy is, right? Everybody knows who Aristotle, Socrates, and, you know, and Plato are. Everybody knows what logos is. Not everybody, but most people know. Most people, this is the explicit part of the culture. People know much less about the Hebrew mystical tradition. People know much less about you know, different tantric traditions. People know much less about you know, ceremonial magic and these other aspects, which are very potent and interesting, are underneath the culture. People are less. People don't know about Hermes that much. He's sort of some weird Egyptian god. So I think that's what's of interest to me is the things that are underneath the culture, or hidden, or
yeah, beautiful. I mean, it's like I have the best example, you know. So you have this Egyptian image of the I don't know what the boat is called. They have like a special name for that. I forgot about
The boat that goes over the river Styx or whatever. Yeah.
No. That that follows the sun in kind of way. And so you have
right.
on the boat there's like because the sun has like different incarnations and different gods attached to him. But then there's always Thoth, and guiding the journey. And so if you look at what we're doing right now, it's like we're tilting and drifting into the weird with our podcast here, and that's Thoth, because it's like we're leaving the mainstream, and it's like if you look at it from a mainstream point of view, it's actually absolutely weird what we're doing here, and I hope we're doing it. It's like I was thinking about this the last week actually. It's like, okay, so let's lean into the weirdness of it all, because it's like the weirder it gets, the more interesting it gets, because that's what we want to do. We don't want to, do mainstream stuff, but I think our core competency and in this kind of setup, what you and me are doing right now, it's just tilting into the weird freak show of, weird theories and myth and psychological insights and philosophical ideas and spiritual things. And so that's
the Hermetic. That's back
Hermes.
to Hermes. That's why I called my course Back to Hermes, because that's where we're going on this boat. That's beautiful. That's kind of like, I like the idea, and I want to use that image that we're on a boat here and we're going with Thoth or Hermes guiding us. Yeah. Because it gets too boring if you remain in the mainstream, in the propositional, and in the in the world of ordinary philosophy. It gets too boring. It gets too intellectual. It gets too mechanical, and it gets to be a kind of a intellectual masturbation. And I think that the spirit of Hermes or Thoth is trying to subvert it's subversive in some kind of a way. It wants to be subversive.
Wild. It's wild, and that is what we have to do. It's like we have to produce. I mean, that's not what we have to do, but what Hermes and Mercury does is it's producing an infinite amount of weird ideas, and most of them, 99% of them, just vanish into the unknown.
So it's like the alchemist in his alchemical chamber. He's always experimenting.
You need this 1% of ideas that is kind of sticking. And so it's like let's tilt, let's follow the path of Mercury, and some ideas will stick,
Yeah, beautiful. I'm sorry I interrupted. I just as you were talking, the image of the alchemist in his chamber was there, and of course, he's trying to create gold, and actually everything fails, like, because you can't create gold. It's like, but what remains is the beautiful artistic metaphors and symbols that come out of the alchemical tradition, right? So the whole project itself is systematically a failure, but it's an enormous success, because the failure leads to, I don't know, all kinds of inventions, like psychoanalysis and chemistry and
right,
whatever came out of the alchemical and new forms of mysticism, and science needs to understand that much of what is science today came out of bizarre experiments of mystics and magicians and alchemists in since the beginning of time, not even just the medieval period. I was learning about Moses de Leon. Do you know who he is?
No.
He's the guy who wrote this book called the Zohar in the 13th century. And the Zohar is the great Jewish mystical text.
I think I have it here.
It's a completely bizarre and strange piece of work, and it's entirely encoded in symbols. And this, this book, and he said he lied when he wrote the book and said it was written by this other rabbi from the first century, but actually he was just sort of channeling information, while in his meditation that became this book, and he, in order to sell it, he said it was written by this other rabbi. In any case, the Zohar was written at the same time as Dante's Inferno and Chaucer's Canterbury Tale, and it was this incredibly bizarre book. And I think that this kind of book is the kind of thing that, while it would appear to be the most obscure, arcane, and hidden information packet of a book, these kind of books are what are going to appear in the next century, right? And people are going to start to study them, and it's a kind of book that continually gives insight, right? Whereas it's not like the Communist Manifesto or Marx, or something where it's like which is revolutionary, and it's not a political tract. It's a spiritual tract, which goes way deep into the unconscious mind and into the superconscious of the culture, and so that's where to go, right? Rather than like throw away your Communist Manifesto and throw away all that shit, throw away all this ideology, and go into the deep Hermetic traditions, and there you will find the gold, the jewels, the magic. That's how I see it.
Sure. Yes, I mean, I'm not completely agreeing, because I think that there's a Pareto principle going on there, that you're producing, and that I think like 98% just is.
Well, the Zohar is considered.
But then what I mean is, then there's like this 1% that kind of sticks on information, and I think like that's how it kind of works, So what is the meme, the underlying meme that sticks? If you look at just Timothy Leary, it's like there all that brimborium of extraterrestrials and what aliens and what, that's just bullshit, but there's an idea in there that kind of reverberates, the idea that there are like different stages of the nervous system, and so on. This is like that kind of still sticks, although the model is shit, but it's still there,
Right. Well, the Zohar is interesting because, I just made the argument that the whole thing kind of fails, right? And that book was probably, right, nobody understood it when it was written at all. There was a few Kabbalists in 13th century Spain, who were playing with this stuff. Whereas, and probably nobody understood it, and again, until like the 19th century, and then but it's actually now considered to be equal to the Torah in some Jewish traditions. It's considered to be the great Jewish masterpiece of mysticism, which actually contains the Sephirot and the Tree of Life and all these things, which didn't actually come into being until hundreds of years later. So there is a way in which you do your thing, and then you don't know when, don't know what the effect of that is, and it might not even occur in your lifetime.
Right.
But you have to like in Tibetan Buddhism, they say have a multi-lifetime view.
Yeah.
Which means that you're not working within this limited perspective of one lifetime. You're working in the vast span of history. Yeah.
I mean, it's like I said it, and I will say it again. I think it's it's about leaning into the weird, and fully committing to that, because you want to have new thoughts, you want to have wild thoughts, thoughts that you never had before, ideas that you never had before, perspectives, and that only happens if you follow Mercury, like as the sphere with the wings, you follow that what is interesting to you, right? And you follow that course, and I think that's the interesting part of living,
For sure. Well, because it's a bit like also it's also the remedy for what Gurdjieff called mechanical man.
Right.
who is living, he doesn't have those wings. He's stuck in a closed loop system. He's caught in the matrix. He's, trapped within his ideology, within his religious presuppositions, within his sort of family structure, within his culture. And there's this kind of and he turns everything into a reified a version of reality, whereas these symbols are not about reifying into some kind of fixed archetypes. When we work with these symbols, we're adding Mercury to the archetypes, so they are dynamic, and they are breaking us out of the straitjacket of the superego or the limited view. This is why Ensof is infinite. It's like there's an infinite potentiality of expression and ideas, and so we work with the point of view of the infinite, not the point of view of any limited construction.
Right. I was like a couple of weeks ago, there was in the local cinema here, there was a showing of Clockwork Orange, right? I never saw that in the cinema. And I saw it like a couple of times on the television, and it was a still amazing experience, like absolutely wild movie. It's like still the violence still like catches you, and the psychological terror. It's and then and after researching after that, so I came onto the meaning of Clockwork Orange. Do you know what it means?
Oh, I've heard that before, but I forget. What is it?
So it's like it comes from a Cockney slang, which is like to be queer as a clockwork orange, and it means to be like very colorful and kind of mainstreamy and like kind of attractive from the outside, and kind of wild and flourishing, but orange. Like sunny, but having in the very core of itself a clockwork, a mechanical thing, and it's showing the fakeness and the mechanical. What did you call that from Gurdjieff? Like the mechanical
machine man, or
yes,
or
like
mummery is another word I like from Alibaba.
Right, and so you have to escape being a clockwork orange, that you're just doing what everybody's doing like the things mechanically, while having the new kind of boss clothes or whatever you're wearing, just like going into the Dionysian, tilting into drifting into the weird and
yeah, and you also have to be quite disciplined to do that, right? That's why there's all these practices and stages of practice and systems set up to allow, like there's one way. I'm leaning into the weird is like very popular in the pop culture. Everybody takes acid, just like Timothy Leary is putting acid in everybody's Kool-Aid, and I don't know how productive that is at this point. That would sort of just, I think, destroy the society.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, there has to be containers for this hermetic practice to take place and to be done properly, and ethics and all of that. So I wouldn't want to think that it would be like promoting some kind of like hippie wildness. On the other hand, there's another kind of wildness which is called crazy wisdom, which is wisdom and wildness, right? It's not just wildness. It's not just experiment. It's experiment with wisdom. And so crazy wisdom is sort of is the end of modeling existence, the end of mechanicalness. I guess that is the spirit of the two wings on the sphere as well. That makes sense. That could also be a symbol of crazy wisdom, I think.
Right. Yeah.
I'd say that in my course, I would say that the idea is really to, because I'm coming from the Vajrayana tradition, is try to let's see if these concepts of crazy wisdom and Buddhist tantra and stuff. Let's see if the Hermetic traditions have that as well, and I think they do, but I think they need to be expressed or brought to the surface or thought through.
Right. So, what are the outlines? Do you have more info on the course?
Sure. Well, it begins March 5th at 5 o'clock to make people in the North America will be able to join, and also people in Europe. It's going to be there's going to be some recorded uh, some recorded lectures, and the outline right now is I'm going to explore different symbol systems. I'm going to look at I'm going to begin, starting with my own tradition, Vajrayana, and I'll talk about Vajrayana symbolism, and then I will move to talking about tarot, and tarot from different perspectives, and kind of the perspective I've landed on in tarot is Jodorowsky's perspective, because it's clear and simple and enough to be usable, to be functional, whereas the very interesting Crowley, Thoth tarot, and other tarot systems tend to combine all these things together and be very complex in terms of correspondences. So I'm sticking with the simple version of the Marseille tarot, and I'm talking about what the book by Tomberg called Christian Hermeticism, which talks about the philosophy of Hermeticism. So we'll be talking about what is gnosis, what is mysticism, and what is magic, within the philosophy of Hermeticism. And then I'll be doing a idiot's version of the Sifrat, you could say, because it's Sifrat and Kabbalah is so complex and I'm such a beginner in that area. But I do think but I have studied it and worked on it for the past couple of years, and I do think that the tree of life model in the Kabbalah is another very interesting symbol system that can be worked with and thought about, and that's very important. And so those are the kind of three symbol systems that I'll be guiding people through. And then we'll try to do experimental meditations based on them. So there'll also be a practical aspect. We'll also do some meditations on symbols and discuss what is meditation, what is contemplation, what is lectio divina. How do you meditate on these sacred texts? I'll also be looking at the book of Genesis a little bit, because it's related to Kabbalah in some kind of a way. And the work of David Cohen Smith. I'm in our Parallax group. We're reading through his book very, very slowly because it's very dense information. And so I'll be talking about that. And so, yeah, so the course will be a combination of lectures and practical work with symbols, and it will be experimental and fun, and should give people a glimpse into something that I don't think that many people really know about. I mean, I don't think people know about the symbolic kind of practices, that they even exist. I think people have a very flat version of spirituality and religion. I mean, there's a lot of people and more who do know about these things. And these things are available. The funny thing is, I was the other day, I was thinking about when I started doing Vajrayana practice. All these practices that were very secret are now, you can download them on the internet, right? And in the 90s, they were still secret. You couldn't talk about them, but now they're all there on the internet. Doesn't mean that people are getting actual transmission of these practices. They're just available to read about. So I want to talk about also the difference between, let's say, real transmission and then just psychobabble and new age bullshit. From my perspective, in working in using different symbolic practices and modes of contemplation.
Fantastic.
I think that's about that's a bit of an overview.